The IJN Kirishima is probably the worst vehicle to come out of the 2024 winter event. I know it's a naval video, but I challenge you guys to watch this entire video. This is a Japanese 7.0 battleship, and it has a top speed of 57 kilometers per hour. This makes the Kirishima the fastest battleship in all of Warthunder. Therefore, it's going to get a speed rating of 10 out of 10. Moving over to agility, this is a battleship and it's very large. So it is extremely clunky and it's really hard to maneuver in small spaces. Although with its speed, it does retain some maneuverability for a battleship. Although there were some points while playing that I just gave up on maneuvering because I got stuck in an awkward spot. Therefore, I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10 for agility, and it's just carried by its speed. Moving over to its offense is kind of interesting because you do have a very fast reload on your secondary cannons, but your primary reload is actually kind of mid for the caliber. Not to mention your 356mm cannon only has 636mm of penetration. This is very much on the lower end of battleship pen. Furthermore, its secondary 152mm cannons only have 82mm of penetration, meaning your secondary fire is basically ineffective against other battleships. The only redeeming quality is the fact that it has more kilograms of explosive yield than the majority of battleships. So I'm going to give it a 2 out of 10 for offense. Moving on to armor, the Kirishima has a maximum armor value of 279mm. Meanwhile, a bunch of other battleships top out at like 457mm. So this basically means that if you broadside any enemies, you're just giving them a free shot at your ammo rack. Although your armor still isn't as bad as other vehicles like the Russian battleships. So I'm going to give it a 4 out of 10 for armor. Moving on to survivability, just like any other ship in the game, you could just tank shells over and over again and suffer no real consequences. A lot of the time though, when I was taking heavy fire, I would lose a majority of my cannons. So while I survived, I couldn't really defend myself, so it was kind of just like I'm going down anyways. So therefore, I'm going to give it a 5 for survivability, because I was able to run back a few times and actually survive. Moving over to SPAA, this thing does get a decent amount of cannons for that, and it wasn't exactly horrible to defend myself, although the angles were kind of awkward when trying to fire. And the Kirishima didn't have access to any type of proxy, so the enemy aircraft had to get really close to get hit by the 25mm autocannons. So in that case, I'm going to give it a 4 out of 10. Moving over to equipment, you do get a hydroplane that you can launch, and it does get access to some bombs and smokescreen, but is notably missing any other type of armament, and the plane itself was shot down almost immediately every time. The only thing it was useful for was smokescreen, so I'm going to give it a 2 out of 10. Moving over to difficulty, this thing wasn't really hard to understand whatsoever because it's basically just sit back and click simulator. The hardest part about playing this battleship was actually when vehicles got really close to you, because it got really awkward to aim your large cannons. But a majority of your fights will not go that way. So with 1 being the hardest and 10 being the easiest, I'm going to give this thing a 7 out of 10 for difficulty. Moving on to fun, it is naval, so a lot of it's just sitting around in the back and taking shots and giving shots, if you know what I mean. And that necessarily isn't very fun to the average player. Although I did have one really fun match where I just went full blast into the enemy because I had a down tier, and I managed to destroy 6 ships, and that was actually pretty fun. But that was the one glimmer of hope in like a 4-hour recording session. So with 10 being the most fun, I'm going to give this thing a 2. Finally, for its overall value, this is an event vehicle and you can only get it from this event or from the Gaijin market. So it is going to be a rare vehicle because not a lot of people actually grinded for it. But it is in a premium and it is placed at rank 5, so it's not the top of the class. And of course it is naval, so not a lot of people actually play it. So the total value is going to be like a 2 out of 10. This gives the Kirishima an overall rating of 44 out of 100. This gives it a low C rating.